Greetings, citizens! You're now trapped in the nerd cage with your hosts Mark and Jay. We hope you have a smashing good time.
Hello and welcome. That's right, you're trapped in NerdCage Live. This ain't just a reaction show, but a debate show and a live discussion on everything that makes people like you and I tick. So thank you for joining us tonight. Please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm your co-host, Jay St. G, coming to you live from Syracuse, New York. And always with me, my man, the Fiend from Louisville, Mark Withers. What's shaking, boss?
Hey, what's going on, man? Super excited to be here as usual. And yes, today we have yet another look back. This is the 20th anniversary of one of my favorite films. It charmed me from the minute I walked in the theater and saw it. Jay, I know that you saw this recently for the first time.
I did.
And that movie is Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. Now, like I said before, I virtually love almost everything about this film, but you as a first-time viewer of this movie, I kind of wanted to get your take on it and see what you thought.
Well, I'm going to take you back real quick. I'm kicking myself in the head that I never bothered getting around to this movie till just now. I always knew about it. You know how I first found out about it? It's just funny. This movie came out just after the American release of Godzilla 2000. Oh, wow. So when Godzilla 2000 came to theaters back in August of 2000, one of the trailers they played was Almost Famous. That's how I knew about this movie, and I just feel bad. I never got around to it, and you recommended it to me, and we happen to have the anniversary coming up, and man, I'm glad I watched it. It was like you said, it's a charming movie. It made me laugh, and it's funny. I used to write for a music website called NewYorkStateMusic.com. So, you know, I kind of like, you know, felt for this kid in this movie because this movie revolves around a journalist trying to do a proper interview for a fictional band, but it was but for a band that he's trying to get an interview for Rolling Stone magazine, and it's just like I can understand the frustrations of trying to do an interview and then put together and trying to hit a deadline and stuff. So it's it was a really great movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Right. And, you know, same here. I mean, one of the things that I really love about this movie is the sort of semi-autobiographical nature of it. So it's actually, loosely based on the life of the director, Cameron Crowe, who wrote for Rolling Stone when he was 16 years old. The character in this movie is actually 15, but a lot of the experiences are sort of a composite of interviews that he did with big bands. In fact, the band Stillwater, which is fictional in the movie, is actually a composite of 5 bands. So from what I understand, it's Poco, Led Zeppelin, the Allman Brothers, the Eagles, and Lynyrd Skynyrd. And there's sort of a lot of real life experiences that happened while he was sort of like meeting with these bands and going on tour with them and things like that. I just thought that was fascinating after I found that out. I don't think I knew that the first time I watched it, but then after sort of reading about it a little bit and finding out a little bit more about who Cameron Crowe was prior to becoming a director, it just made the movie that much more fascinating to me.
Not just that, but I'm watching the opening credits and I see Nancy Wilson of Heart scored the movie. Right.
Well, she was married to Cameron Crowe at the time, so that's kind of a fun fact. And, there are 5 songs that the Stillwater band from the film perform in that movie. And she wrote 3 of them, including their big hit in the movie, Fever Dog. The other 2 were written by Peter Frampton and Mike McCready from Pearl Jam. So that's another fun fact.
Oh, wow. Okay, I did not know that. And it's cool. It's cool you mentioned Mike McCready because he's got that connection to Cameron Crowe from the movie Single.
Right.
Which I hate to admit this, I haven't seen, but I have that soundtrack. I'm the biggest Soundgarden fan. That's why I wore the shirt today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that soundtrack to the movie Singles, and I didn't realize that Cameron Crowe did that movie too, along with Jerry Maguire.
Right. And he seems to have a pretty pretty big connection with a lot of those like Seattle bands from that time. Another fun fact about that movie is that Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains was supposed to play one of the members of Stillwater, but he had to back out because there was a scheduling conflict. He was recording an album at the time and he couldn't get out of it.
Yep.
So they wound up casting Mark, what's his name? Mark Kozelik, I think his name is, but he's in a band called the Red House Painters, and they cast him in that role instead. But yeah, originally it was supposed to be Jerry Cantrell, which I thought was super fascinating.
Yeah, and it makes sense because if you look at the timeline, I'm a big Alice in Chains fans too, and Jerry did put out 2 solo albums right after Lane Stanley passed away, so it all makes sense. Yeah.
You know, one of the other cool things about that movie is just the, you know, how you and I, you know, often will talk about, you know, movies that have big stars in them before they were stars. So if you look back at this movie, you'll see, you know, it's got, Jimmy Fallon, you know, it's got, like you said, Kate Hudson, you know, this was her breakout role. Jason Lee was in it. I mean, you know, just about Rainn Wilson from The Office was in it. Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family. I mean, you know, it's always like fun to go back and do one of these like look backs and do a rewatch and see all these people before they became big and see their, you know, their budding talent just in, you know, in the very beginning of their career.
And it's funny because Anna Paquin a couple months prior did X-Men. And she had a very, very small role in this film, and I was just like, oh wow! So she at the same time she was doing this movie and X-Men. I thought that was pretty cool to see her in there. Right.
And you know, also, oh man, why am I spacing on people's names? Fairuza Balk from the Craft is also in this movie. And you know,
talk about a blast from the past.
Right, exactly. You know, this would have been, you know, maybe a year or two after The Waterboy came out. So this is the last movie that I think I remember seeing her in. Actually, I don't know if she'd done anything big after this movie. But you know, speaking of which, the Band-Aids in this movie, you know, Anna Paquin, Fairuza Balk, Kate Hudson, they're actually based on a real group of like veteran groupies called the Flying Garter Girls. So every character in that movie is actually based on a real person. And Penny Lane, who is Kate Hudson's character, is actually based on a real life person named Penny Ann Trumbull, who's like now this very well-to-do socialite, but at the time she was like a very like well-known groupie who like traveled with a lot of these bands.
And then the older sister there, Zooey Deschanel, she's become huge now.
That's right. I almost forgot about her.
Her role was really brief, but I would say everybody knows her in like in The New Girl and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if I'm not mistaken. She was in that one too. But yeah, it was cool seeing her in there. All right, Mark. So let's talk about the mother for a second.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie to you. At first, I like hated her in the very beginning of the movie, when the older sister moved out. I'm like, oh my gosh, so we're gonna have one of those mothers, you know, the enemy of rock and roll, hey, this is gonna corrupt you and blah 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 blah.
Right.
But as the movie went on, I thought she was pretty funny, and the thing is about the mother in this movie, at least she actually allowed her son to go on tour with this band under the age of 18. So. Right. I get it. She was being overprotective. I get it. She was calling them at every hotel, and I get that. But you know, at the end of the day, I was like, okay, she's just looking out for her son, and you know, she's not as mean and evil she came off, you know, early on in the movie. You know, I thought it was pretty funny. Every time like she was calling and like, you know, like the band, one of the girls answered the phone and said, "Hey, are you the one with the weed?" or something like that. It's just like, oh my God. I was laughing. That's where the comedy comes in. The comedy in this movie comes in is when the mother's checking on her son, and that really gave a really, really awesome element to this movie.
Right, and you bring up a really good point, right? Because she's sort of like the, you know, I don't want to say the villain, but sort of the heel in this movie. Mm-hmm. You know, like she's sort of looked at as like this bad authority figure who kind of wants to stop William from completing this task and completing this journey. But if you really think about it, I think any mom at that time would have said no from the beginning. You know what I mean? And by the way, I mean, that role is brilliantly played by Frances McDormand. I mean, she's like one of my favorite actresses. She's fantastic. And fun fact about that is that Cameron Crowe actually based that character off of his own mother, who during filming actually visited the set every day to make sure that they were getting the portrayal of her right, and from what I read, he was really worried about her kind of gumming up the works and kind of making things difficult. But she actually ended up becoming really good friends with Frances McDormand, who played her in the movie. So I kind of thought that was cool.
Yeah, and another funny scene, hope we're not getting into too much spoiler territory, but at the very end, when they're in the airplane and they think they might be crashing,
right?
They hit the electrical storm and they all start like coming out and saying things, revealing truths about each other that, confessions, because they want to die with a clear conscience, and won't go into any of those details, but that was
yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, and it's that is, ironically, that scene is like a very thinly veiled reference to Leonard Skinner, who had a plane crash, in the late 70s, and so the real life events of that were obviously much darker than that moment. But yeah, I agree with you. That is one of the funnier, one of the more interesting scenes of the movie. Another one is the scene where Billy Crudup's character actually, is standing on top of this roof at a house party and he's screaming, "I am a golden god," getting ready to.
I was nervous.
Yeah, that's like one of the more like nail biting moments. That actually happened though. According to Cameron Crowe, there was an event that occurred between them and the Allman Brothers where they were actually at a party. I don't know if they were hosting a party or they were at a party, and it actually took place at a motel. And one of the Allman Brothers actually got on the roof of that motel and jumped into the pool, and he did it like numerous times, and they kind of based that scene off of that particular event.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And another scene. Here's a scene that was pretty gut wrenching. It wasn't funny at all, actually, but because you kind of bring up the Allman Brothers stuff. But the scene where they're at the poker table there, and they're like betting like the groupies and the beer and whatever, and like, and they're saying like, "Oh, this guy's from the Who, this guy's from so and so, this guy's from so and so." So
right,
like, I'm wondering if that was like any like based on anything that was true, that they had this, they were betting with other bands of trading away assets,
Right. I mean, I'm sure that that is actually based on real events, although there's no real, there's nothing real to like reference that to, but it wouldn't surprise me if that turned out to be something that was true, because things like that did happen to go down in the 70s, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, like I said, this movie, again, it's a fun watch, and it's basically, if you're a fan of like any like 70s rock and hard rock, like if you're a fan of like Zeppelin, Skinner, Sabbath, Sabbath kind of, you don't see Sabbath in the movie, but there's one setting where they're at the Black Sabbath concert, and he's trying to get that first interview with Black Sabbath.
Right.
Really, really love that setting, and you can hear a Sweet Leaf in the background being played live, and I was a little bit. I knew they were going to show Black Sabbath. I was kind of hoping they would, but like maybe we get to see like these actors play Black Sabbath. We didn't get that, but it was still a really cool setting, a cool scene. But yeah, if you're a fan of that era of music, you're gonna love this movie.
Right, and that is absolutely the reason why I fell in love with it in the first place. I mean, not only did they kind of have these sort of fictional bands in there, and fictional music that was reminiscent of that time, they actually referenced like real life bands that, even though they didn't appear, it was nice to kind of see that reference. You get references to the Black Sabbath, to the Guess Who, to, Humble Pie, A lot of those bands from
New
the
York
early
City.
70s, right? Exactly. And it's a nice, it's kind of a nice tribute to that era. And I kind of find it super interesting that they had like these sort of fictional characters that were weaved in with like real life people, like the guy that mentors William in the film, Lester Bangs. He was a real person. He was a real a real music critic from the 70s. And also the editor at Rolling Stone, Ben Fong Torres, the Asian guy that hires him to actually do the interview. He's actually a real person. He was a real editor at Rolling Stone that worked with Cameron Crowe at the time. And one of the things that he said about Cameron Crowe's tenure at Rolling Stone was that he was that guy that could actually get in with all of these bands that hated the magazine and hated journalists because they were getting such a bad rap in the press. Like around that time, the newer, heavier bands like your Black Sabbaths and your Led Zeppelins, they were getting like horrible reviews from like traditional critics who really didn't understand this sort of musical revolution that was happening. And like one of the magazines that was notorious for that at the time was Rolling Stone. So, it was a kind of a nice, convenient thing to have this young kid who had a love and a fascination with these bands and kind of like had held them up on a pedestal, that they could kind of use that as a means of getting access to these bands and as a way to sort of be able to write good stories about them.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
very well said, man. I didn't pick up on any of that. I see. I never realized like the historical stuff in this. I mean, I wasn't around in the 70s, yeah, I didn't realize all that stuff about Rolling Stone was true, and those were actually real editors. I mean, like, wow, now my mind's blown now, man. Yo, thanks so much for showing me this movie. At the time of this recording, this movie's readily available to rent. Unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere for free, but you can rent it for like $4 on Vudu and Prime. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. Hopefully someone else will pick it up so people can watch it for free. But if you don't mind renting it, it's worth the money. If you haven't seen it, you don't mind dropping the $4 to rent it. I was very pleased with it. It's a good solid 2-hour flick. That doesn't feel like 2 hours. It's a fun ride. It really is, because it takes you on a journey, with this band, in the 70s on this tour, and you feel like you're part of it. So it's a highly recommended recommendation from your boy Jay.
One of the deleted scenes in that movie is super interesting. There's a scene where these teachers are and at William's house, and they're trying to convince his mom to let him go on tour with Stillwater.
Oh, wow.
And he is, he's trying to explain to his mom, like, why this is so important to him and, like, what it means to him. So he pulls out a Led Zeppelin album, and he puts on Stairway to Heaven. At the time, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, they weren't allowing Cameron Crowe the rights to use the song. And so there's like a watermark on that deleted scene that, where you can kind of set up the song to play yourself. And so it gives you like a cue to hit play so that you get the full experience of like, okay, this is what they're hearing and what they're experiencing through that scene. And I just thought that was like a pretty interesting way to kind of make that work, even though they couldn't use that in a theatrical release. It's kind of nice to be able to kind of make that scene work in sort of a home release edition. And I think that clip is available on YouTube for anybody who wants to check that out and try that out.
Okay, very interesting. All right. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this one up?
No, I mean, I think that, I highly recommend this movie for anyone who really is into 70s rock. And even if you're not, if you're just a fan of like really good performances, this is a chance for you to see, one of the last great performances of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Frances McDormand's in it. She's absolutely fantastic. This is the breakout performance of Kate Hudson. And then you also get, these newcomers at the time who would go on to become great stars, Rainn Wilson, Eric Stonestreet, Jimmy Fallon. There's a lot of big names in this movie. Billy Crudup, who's now on the morning show, but he played Russell Hammond in the film, and he's absolutely fantastic. So I would highly recommend this to anybody who is looking for a music related film with really good performances in it.
Absolutely, yeah, and also we just want to let know everybody out there's we're going to do another look back at the movie The Town, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary at the time of this recording. So we really hope you guys check that out too. We do plan on doing a lot more look backs the rest of the year, and we have a whole plethora of them coming up in 2021. So we're really happy you guys are digging this format of doing these look backs, and we're gonna do a lot more. So we appreciate the support, and of course come to our keep coming to these live streams every Thursday. We have a blast doing them. And one thing before we go, I just want to say that I'm gonna put a link down below. I actually did an article for NewYorkStateMusic.com years ago talking about the top 10 fictional hard rock and metal bands, and Stillwater was in there.
Awesome.
Speaking of NewYorkStateMusic.com, the editor of that website will be one of our guests coming up on one of our Thursday streams in a couple weeks, so we're really looking forward to that. Before we go, we ask you to pretty please like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell and spread that shit like syphilis. So the USA, from Louisville to Syracuse, to all of our friends and fans around the world at NerdCage Live, enjoy life, stay safe, and good night.
Sayonara.
Go Giants.
Ooh, trying to get out of the nerd cage, are ya? Well, before you go, hit that subscribe button. And if you're really intrigued, ring that bell. Thank you for dropping by. Until next time, tell everyone you know about NerdCage Live!